paternal nephew, the Ibn Ayam of the second husband, and maybe perhaps he's also the brother-in-law. But he's a strong figure, an influential figure, and he's, by all accounts, a Salafist himself, having studied, I believe, in Saudi Arabia or Egypt. So that adds an element of uncertainty and difficulty for the government to deal. But of course, the one thing I think that's gotten the most attention and is the most worrying is the water situation. In the late 90s, when I was there, the Dutch did a study and predicted water would run out in the Sana Plain by 2008. Well, that hasn't happened yet, but it is happening. Water is now being trucked into Sana. It's not new to Yemen. Even in the 90s, in Taiz, I understood that people got water out of their taps only once every 45 days. But it's happening in Sana, which is a bad feature. I think we know that it's the massive use of agricultural water, the growing of gat, which is causing the major problem, large overuse of the aquifers and the fossil water. But the government really doesn't have the ability to control the drilling of wells or the use. Some people also drill wells and then sell the water. But I heard a suggestion not long ago, well, they'll all move to the Tahama when they run out. Those of you who know Yemen know how unlikely that situation is. But you can foresee a situation in which farms give up, rural incomes go down, people move into towns or into Sana with a city that's also growing very rapidly, and eventually Sana also now has problems. It's a very difficult problem to deal with. Even if you could imagine Yemen could desalt its water, you would have to, from Hodeidah, transport it a couple of 100 kilometers and up about 8,000 feet. And you can think of even with some natural gas, what the prospects for that would be. So Yemen is facing some really serious resource problems. The U.S. is now, once again, I think, the way we've dealt with Yemen is a little bit like Afghanistan. When it wasn't on the radar, we just forgot about it, and now we're remembering it. But in the meantime, things have become more dire for Yemenis. The amount of money the United States can provide is certainly significant, but it is not going to solve the problems. I think in the end, if anybody is going to have to really help, it's going to have to be Saudi Arabia and the other countries of the GCC, a bit of a mixed blessing. I understand that it is becoming a little easier for Yemenis to work in Saudi Arabia again, but obviously the most immediate way one could help Yemenis is by opening up the labor force again, although, as we know, this would also pose security problems. But otherwise, it's very difficult to see how Yemen will get through its problems. I certainly wish it well. I'm very fond of the country, and I think it's going to face some difficult times. Yemen, as many people have noted, has muddled through before some very hard times, a full-scale civil war in the 60s, the trouble with the South in 94, Egyptian occupation, which I witnessed firsthand, and the hard times it went through when all the hundreds and hundreds of thousands of Yemenis were suddenly expelled from Saudi Arabia and the Gulf. The Yemenis are people who have coped in adversity very well in the past, but these problems are really going to test their mettle. So on that positive note, I would like to be as optimistic as I was sometime in the past, but I really can't quite bring myself to do so. But thank you very much, and if I could turn it over to Ambassador Gillespie.
Thank you very much. Thank you. It's a daunting challenge to follow so distinguished a Foreign Service officer and Yemen expert as Ambassador Newton is. But I think in my career I have followed him in other places, so I'll give it a try here at the Middle East Institute. I don't think most of you are here because some crazy Nigerian tried to stuff explosives in his underwear and take down an American plane. That, however, is why so many Americans, especially the media and others, are focused on Yemen right now. And it is the al-Qaeda connection that attracts our attention. But I think for many of you in the room who have followed the Middle East and followed Yemen for some time, the challenges that confront Yemen, including a resurgent al-Qaeda, are not new. And I'm not going to waste your time going through my standard NDU PowerPoint. Military loves PowerPoints. I see you don't even have PowerPoint equipment here, which is very good. No, I tell them state officers don't do PowerPoint. But in fact, I've been working with the military for so long that I've gotten pretty good at it. I've been giving this Yemen the Next War presentation in various iterations since I arrived at NDU in August, around town a bit, but mostly at NDU, Department of Defense, over at State Department, as we in the U.S. government, and most particularly those involved in security, have indeed refocused on Yemen. The terrible incident at Fort Hood and the attempt to take down the airplane in Minneapolis attracted a lot of media attention, have filled rooms throughout Washington in the last few days. But in fact, the previous administration and this administration have spent a lot of time thinking about Yemen. Occasionally, they spent a lot of time doing something about Yemen. Not enough, not always the right focus. And, of course, for us, the priority in Yemen is the defeat, once again, of al-Qaeda, this time al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula. Yemenis don't see it that way. I had breakfast with the foreign minister a couple of days ago, and we talked about his meetings here in Washington, what he might expect. I have great respect and admire Abu Bakr al-Kirbi very much, but I told him once again, the issue at the top of everybody's agenda in this town is going to be al-Qaeda. And you, for better or worse, whether you agree or don't agree, have got to put it at the top of your agenda once again. Ambassador Newton listed the other challenges that Yemen faced, and I would agree with him that these are far more serious, long-term challenges to Yemen, to the stability, the existence, if you will. If you're looking at existential threats to the Yemeni government and to the nation as it stands today, the challenges that David listed are far more serious. And we, the international community and the United States, need to develop, along with our Yemeni counterparts, a more effective strategy to deal with poverty and illiteracy and water and the other issues that confront them. I want to go through briefly, if I could, a little history. And forgive me, those of you who know the history of al-Qaeda in Yemen. I'm not an expert. I'm not an expert on Yemen, frankly. I'm a State Department operator. Those of you who have worked with me before, I've done a lot of different issues in my career. I've jumped from Kashmir to the Palestinians, the Israelis, into commercial issues in Dubai. I worked on the early days in Iraq with Bremer in Iraq. Most recently, I was with the Kurds. I tend to just get out in the field, ask Washington what the hell they want me to do, and try to do it. So I'm not a policy guy, and I'm not an expert. And I deliberately refrain from becoming an expert in Yemen, as tempting as it is, because it is a fascinating and wonderful place to be. But I would sit with gentlemen like Abu Bakr al-Kirbi and others and say, I really don't care a whole lot about your history. I don't really care a whole lot about